start with this, Joe. How did you first encounter Stafford?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Garrick. I must be going back about 25 to 30 odd years, and I was invited to a conference in Orlando in America to give a talk on artificial intelligence. So we had a busy afternoon at the conference, and in the evening there was an after-dinner speaker. But at that time, the name itself did not mean anything to me. It was Stafford, of course, that I'm talking about, but I didn't know who he was or what his subject matter was. But I was late for the meal, and I was sitting down. Unfortunately, I had me back because the way that we were sitting around the table. I had me back to him, just finishing off me meal, and I heard the utterance of just a key number of words: in the animal and the machine. And that really, would you believe, brought the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, because up to that point, I'd been given a new job for British Telecom, and I was looking after a large organisation of people. A bit of background to be able to understand my setting there is I was really a real mathematician. I was a real systems control engineer and doing a lot of modelling of systems. And I wasn't just on about simple systems like temperature control, say in an operating theatre. I was also working at the hospital at that time. One of the issues was the actual type of control I was looking at would move around. It would move around from temperature control to comfort control. Comfort control is more subjective. Temperature control is more objective. But now I've got this organisation that I'm looking after. And the organisation I'm looking after means I need to understand the model. I'm always trying to understand the world through models. And I was struggling at that time to understand how to model the organisation. So the utterance of those few words, in the animal and the machine, meant that there was no distinction being made by Norbert Weiner between the human and a mechanical system. Effectively, they all obeyed the same underlying cybernetic laws. So that made a difference on how I was going to take these ideas forward. I think the issue I had, I was a wee bit disappointed at the time because I like to find things out for myself. I hadn't struggled long enough really to get an answer to my question in terms of what is organisation and how can I even go about modelling it. But Stafford gave me the VSM and I've been using it ever since, and it's given me real insights, you know, how to look at a complex system and how to be able to tame it. You know, I don't want to make it domesticated like a dog. I don't want to make it feral like a cat. I want it, you know, to be not controllable, but I want to be able to influence the complex system, you know. And he gave me the science behind that and the model that we now know as the viable systems model.
And when did you first actually meet Stafford in person, as far as ongoing?
Yeah. So I was working alongside at the same time a person called Professor Alfredo Moscardini from what at that time would have been Sunderland University. And it so happened that Alfredo knew Stafford pretty well, and I knew Alfredo. And he actually sort of was the lecturer on one of the courses I was doing on engineering, and he was, you know, delivering mathematics. And I got to know him quite well, and he made that formal link for me. Although I was aware of Stafford in Orlando, Alfredo gave me the connection to Stafford, and we invited him up to Newcastle, and I would give him an overview of the type of work I was doing. So at that time, the problem at hand was trying to improve the public payphone organisation for the northeast of England. And I was able to use the VSM to be able to break that down into various, what we would now know as System 1s, okay, and put an overall framework over it. But I think one of the abilities I had is that because I can easily program computers and build mathematical models, because that was all part of my background, I was able to make these models real. And what I mean by real is that although we're calling it a model, the actual model was the kernel of the organization. So what and the insight that I got there is that when I was building the model on paper, and I then used the VSM to wrap around the model, I was able to manage and control the model by using computer algorithms. Then I had the challenge, of course, I've got the model, but I need somehow to psychologically tether management into that model. Okay, so they could have control over that part of the model. And what is interesting is that although no individual understands their business, right, the business can understand itself. And the business really, we're now sort of found out maybe a few years later, the business is its conversations. If you remove the conversations from the business, you've got no organization. The organization is built on its conversations. And I think one of the biggest challenges I've got is to make those conversations meaningful, all right? In order to do that, I mean, one of the powerful things, this is, it seems almost like an oxymoron. One of the most powerful things about language is that it's ambiguous. But it's also one of its biggest failings as well, because if I want to control a formal system using language, I would come unstuck. But what I'm doing now as a result of Stafford's work is I'm trying to language, right, the organization into consciousness. You know, you think that's quite a challenge, and it is a challenge. But in order for me to be able to take Stafford's work forward in that direction, I'm using the work of Judea Pearl in terms of causal modeling. So the causal model becomes the ontology of the organization. The epistemology is how I'm using the ontology to be able to move that business forward. So when I look at it in that perspective, you know, I can look at the VSM and I see the VSM in 3 levels. At the lowest level, we've got system 3, which we could call that as a first order cybernetic system, where effectively the observer is outside of the system. So what do I mean by that? I mean the observer cannot change the ontology, and the observer cannot change the epistemology. It's there as a given. All we do is we parameterize the model, okay, and we'll get a certain output. An example, and I know this example is always used, it's the thermostat. The thermostat is an example of a first order system. But that is system 3. Remember, Stafford brings all of these systems together in a beautiful way, and I just love the idea of the fractal. Although having said that, I don't think Stafford ever used the term fractal. I wish now, with hindsight, I'd asked him that direct. We would talk about the recursive nature. I would be very curious to understand why he never used the term fractal. But that was first order cybernetics. Second order cybernetics is where the observer now enters the system. Right, so when I visualize that within the VSM, when he's entering the system, he's now got control over the epistemology. He can change the model. He's got the freedom to change the model. And then we've got system 5. So what does system 5 do? Well, system 5, one of the issues we have is that, you know, if I continue to live inside my room, if I continue to stay inside my room, am I alive? I've got to go outside the room to see whether I'm alive or not, okay? So system 5 enables us to break free of the system. And we can't change the ontology by staying inside the system. We've got to move outside of it. So I'll use an idea from Kurt Gödel, and I'll call this the Gödelian escape, or we're escaping the imprisonment of our room. We're going outside the room to see if we're truly, well and truly alive. So effectively, it means that ontology is open to grab. We can actually then change the ontology and reposition the business. But at this time, I'll just briefly introduce the work of Carl Friston. So Carl Friston focuses on the free energy principle, but I'm just going to use another term and replace free energy principle with surprise, right? Is that when we're surprised, it's like an algedonic. This could be Stafford's algedonic firing. It comes right through severing 3, 4 and going up to 5 to say that really the businesses are really struggling here. So the business is surprised. We've got normally only 2 options from Carl Friston's perspective. We can either change the model or we can change our environment. And remember, the model is not the body. The model controls the body. The body is fully controllable, whereas the environment outside the body is only partially influenced by what we do. You know, we have no tight control over that environment. So anyway, what we've got is we've got first order, second order, and we've got third order, right? So the third order, I'm just reviewing what I'm saying. With Carl Friston, we can change the model or we change our environment. Changing the environment is like an ontological change. We're changing effectively who we are, our relationship to the environment that we're currently in, right? Changing that relationship is ontological, and and we do that by moving purposefully from the model we've got. Our model tells us that we are struggling in this environment, and we're moving to a slightly different environment where we're not intimidated by the dynamics of the environment that we are in. And we must remember, so I'll just very briefly bring in thermodynamics, because with thermodynamics it gives us another type of grounding here, that we are sort of out of equilibrium dissipative systems, okay? And to be able to survive, we have to be able to maintain our gradients into the environment, right? To continue metabolism of the materials coming in to be able to recreate our body. Okay, so the challenge that we've got there is to be able to continuously move to stand still. We can't stand still because we are consuming resources, and if we don't move, right, we'll run out of resources. We've actually sort of depleted the area we're in, so we're moving around in that area. So Stafford really has given me that way of thinking that enables me to explore the world, but more importantly, I can bring new concepts together into that exploration to enable me to have a deeper thinking about it.
That's great, thank you. Trying to think what I missed here. Okay, so I don't know if I have anything else to ask, because you really covered most of it.
Well, maybe what I would add to that, Garrick, is that the really powerful thing that I got from Stafford is how to think about thinking. You know, that makes a fantastic difference to me, is that clarity of thinking. And I'm very, very visual. You know, when I'm giving a problem, I'm always visually solving it in my head. You know, and I've got the ability of doing that. But Stafford has given me that ability to be able to look at the world differently and to think about thinking. You know, what is it when I'm doing the thinking? And that gives me these 3 tiers of ordering cybernetics. I can think differently in each area, so it helps to break that thinking down. So I'm not always solving the problems of the universe, right? I'm actually able to break it down and have a search pattern through the environment, which is constrained, but open enough so I can move around in that opened area of the environment that sits outside of us.
And when you met Stafford personally on occasion, what was your experience of him as a person, as a human being? Did you have any thoughts about the way he communicated, about his view of the world? So yeah, I mean, I'm going to now maybe reflect on one of the paintings that I came across. This was a painting of himself, which is quite interesting because I don't think many people do paint themselves, right? But he looked very, very stern. And I thought, what am I reading into that? And I think what I'm reading into that self-portrait of himself is that he's really very annoyed at how slowly we're moving forward with his ideas and insights. It's interesting, I was at a conference just yesterday at Manchester Business School, and they were on about really the management and getting insights on what to be able to put on the MBA course and make changes to the MBA course to accommodate AI. And I was really very, very surprised that cybernetics or even understanding the mechanics of organisation was never there. And I felt also frustrated as well, because I feel as if, you know, maybe the lecturers and the people who are running these courses are maybe letting the system down. And they're all doing it. They're all doing that. I'm very rarely see anything about cybernetics. As an engineer, right, I need to understand how things work because I've got to fix them. Who fixes the organisation? And I think that was the frustration that Stafford had. And it's a beautiful painting of himself. And I think that would be a good provocation that could be used at the beginning of any sort of meeting we have at cybernetics, you know, to just think, well, remember, we've got Stafford there. He's not happy with what we've done so far. You know, let us get our act together.
Lovely. Okay, let me just pause for a minute here. I need to stop and think of this. Did he ever talk to you about Iron Day or about that period and his experience? Did he ever reflect on that at all, or did he not go there?
Very briefly, and I know he was doing a lot of work at that time, of course, with Raoul the Specular, and I know Raoul reasonably well. But I would love to have got deeper into the actual design of the models and the cybernetic feedbacks that were being used. But I know that was in the early days of computation, of computers. So maybe the type of networks that we see around us all the time, you know, never had them. They were using fax machines to be able to move data around and trying to absorb them. And yeah, I would love to be able to comment on that on maybe a later video, because I would love to spend time looking at material and trying to get underneath that and see how it compares with how I would have approached a very, very similar problem. But unfortunately, you know, I can't see anything much about it in the level of detail that I would class as really understanding how we approach the problem.